Hi, Richard Norton. We're just continuing on. When I say we, my dear friend, Master Faraboz, who's been instrumental in posting some chats and everything with various martial artists. Recently, of course, a dear friend and role model of mine, Sensei Benny the Jet Urquidez. And Faraboz just likes to pick some different topics and get some opinions from his friends in the martial arts world. And he's sitting here right now, so I'm putting him on the spot and going to have him ask a question. Just keep in mind again when we do this that I really like to stress, because I hate the idea of getting 50,000 comments, albeit hopefully positive, but commenting on what I say. But just remember, these are just my opinions. It's my journey, and I'm trying to pass on whatever I believe is relevant knowledge and what I've gleaned from my martial arts journey. So if nothing else, if it instigates or creates a little bit of internal thought and retrospect and introspection with different martial artists, especially instructors, then I think that's a good thing. So that's really the purpose of this. So, Mr. Faraboz, fire away.
Yeah. First of all, I miss our talks, and I know people do, because there's so much out there about technical aspects, not enough about character development. So I love when we get a chance to talk to you about character development. So one of the questions that I came up and I asked Sensei Benny, and he answered very eloquently, but I wanted to ask you about your opinion, is do you think there is a distinction between martial arts and self-defense?
When you say a distinction, do you mean between a club that teaches, say, traditional martial arts and specifically self-defense?
Because I'm a school owner, as a school owner myself, do I have the responsibility, or should I be responsible to tell people, educate them about the difference, and which is more important? When I hear to say which one is more important, in your opinion, is there a difference between the two, between the traditional martial arts and the self-defense? That's something that happens in the street under pressure. And should we as instructors and school owners talk about this subject and educate people more?
Yes. In a nutshell, yes. Okay, that's the end of this interview. No, I think there is, obviously, in my mind and in my whole martial arts career, you need both, you can have both, but they are different. The thing that's important, I believe, is balance. Because, when I started martial arts, I was a kid. I'm 11 years old and I'm doing judo. It was very much about the art. And I say the art because, in retrospect, I believe as 11, 12-year-old, there's not a lot I could have done in a real fight situation with judo. I started karate probably when I was 14 years of age. And again, my introduction to karate was really the art. It was goju-ryu, Okinawan goju, although very much Japanese-based style. And that was taught to me by Tino Severano, Hanshi Tino, who was a Hawaiian Filipino, came out to Australia in the 60s, and I became a student of Tino's. And that was all about the art. Now, a byproduct of learning the art was of course self-defense. You learn to punch hard, you learn to kick hard, et cetera, you do different techniques involving grabs and wrist locks and everything else that are pertinent to the explanation of the bunkai or the explanation of the movements in kata that you do. And so there was an aspect of that, but I wouldn't say there was a real emphasis that this would or would not work in the street. I think it was really just that one would look and say, well, yes, if I threw my getty, like a front kick, as hard as we did in our normal training, and I hit the average person in the street, of course I'm going to do damage. Probably the thing that's missing with that is that you don't really get pressure tested in the same way that a street would. As anyone that's been in an actual street fight or defense situation knows that with adrenal dump and the effects of elevated pulse rates, everything changes. because elevated pulse rates affect your cognitive skills. You know, we used to have a saying that the forebrain gets hijacked by the midbrain. You become very much like an animal when in a state of fear. And when I talk about fear, by the way, you know, as our friend Jeff Thompson always used to say, a friend in England who wrote a lot of books about fear, and he worked as a doorman and everything. He used to say those people that say they don't feel fear are either stupid or they're liars. In other words, everybody's going to feel fear. So it's an aspect that you need to know, and I believe students should be at least aware of should they ever get into an actual street fight and a life and death situation, because it is different. When you're confronted in that bar or a pub or whatever it is with a guy that says he's going to rip your head off, and suddenly you're actually thinking, am I going to walk away from this? You know, am I going to lose my life or whatever, or serious grievous bodily harm or whatever it is? That's incredibly confronting. And most, I think, traditional schools do not prepare you for that. They might say they do. You're sparring with one of the tougher, bigger guys in the dojo, and he's a bit scary and everything, but it's still very controlled. You know, you bow, you step backwards, and then you spar. There's usually an instructor that's there to yell, stop, if things get out of control, either physically or emotionally. So there's always that security blanket, which again is just not there in the street. In the street, there are no rules. You have no idea. There's no one that dictates that what technique is legal. Even MMA, as you know, has rules. You can't fish hook, you can't gouge the eyes, you can't attack the groin and everything. And so there's rules, you know, which makes it kind of sport, albeit a very tough kind of sport. But again, and I'm getting back to the more traditional sort of arts. There's not a lot of emphasis on that, and I think it's vital. It doesn't mean that as an instructor you would have to tell your students that they have to go out and get in a street fight to know what that feels like. Obviously, that's completely not what we would be advocating. So all you can do at best, at least, is pressure test their techniques in whatever ways you can. There's different drills you can do. But I think you have to be honest with them and tell them that it still is not allowing them to experience an actual life or death situation. That's got to remain in the theoretical realm for each student. But by at least having been through that myself, you know, working as a bodyguard for 25 years with rock and roll bands, as some of you already know, working on doors, you know, knowing what that adrenalized state, that adrenal dump feels, and what it does to your body and your ability to perform complex motor skills. I mean, we just go to what we call gross motor skills. You know, when you get pulse rates, sometimes, by the way, of up over 200 beats a minute, it's almost like being cold. Nothing works. And there's a reason for that. The blood is drawn away from what it calls the non-essential areas of the body to prepare you for fight or flight. You've either got to run like a madman or you've got to fight like a cornered animal, you know. And again, it's very hard to replicate that in a traditional school. Now, you can then go to say, well, then I should maybe go to an MMA school that is really about mixed martial arts. And by the way, I keep saying, for me, MMA refers to what we did, you know, with Zendokai, Bob Jones and myself, you know, it's instrumentalist style that Bob created back in Australia. We had a lot of doormen, a lot of really rough and tough people in that school. But there was a balance. So you go to MMA, as I said, there's still rules, you know, there's still a ring, there's still a referee, there's still a guy saying, are you ready, let's get it on. That to me makes it what I call consensual sparring. I've agreed to fight him, he's agreed to fight me, we're physically ready and everything else. Nobody else is going to jump into the fight, which is unlike the street. You have no idea when you're standing in that crowd and one guy is basically in your face, who's with him, who his friends are, you know. So those aspects have got to come into it. And again, it's very hard to replicate that in a traditional dojo. So all you can really do is try and give drills and tell people what that is like. So I guess what I'm really getting to is it's essential that there's a balance. Because here's the other thing, I honestly believe that within 6 months, you could probably teach the average person suitable skills that would allow themselves to handle the average street person. I'm not talking about an experienced street fighter or a professional boxer or MMA guy, but the average street person. So I think you could impart those skills in basically a 6-month period of time. So then what, Well, if all you're worried about is does it work in the street, you miss the opportunity to learn the art. And herein comes the thing about that word martial art, that, Rodney King, who I've never met Rodney, has, monkey boxing, he's South African. He did a great little blog about this, talking about martial art, that so many people are so concerned with the martial, the warlike qualities of what we do, and they're forgetting about the art. And the reason that the art needs to be there is to keep you balanced, to learn the respect, the etiquette. The idea of bowing, as I always said, is not so much it's an Oriental and Asian thing that we bow, but it's just allowing your personality to show respect to another person standing in front of you, higher ranks, lower ranks, of those around you, to the dojo as you enter. And that, I think, is very tempering for one's personality. So it's kind of like, and this is, by the way, where the chivalry comes in, the balance, the chivalry. If you look at the samurai, they were versed in the tea ceremony, cha no yu and ikebana, with flower arranging, not just the martial and the ways of the sword. And I believe that's what made them very balanced gentlemen, rather than just purely on the martial and almost like loose cannons out there in the street. Again, you look at some of the techniques we do in mixed martial arts or even Muay Thai, you learn a few elbows, a few leg kicks, a bit of a clinch up. You're a pretty dangerous person out there. So if you don't have that balance in your martial arts school that involves the art, the chivalry of what it likes, again, to just be humble, with your techniques. And I tell you, one of the best analogies I heard is from Sensei Ben, and where he often talks about, when I'm teaching you all these kind of warlike techniques, I'm giving you bits of metal and I'm giving you bits of plastic and I'm teaching you to make a handgun. And eventually I'm teaching you to put bullets in that handgun. And by the way, that's an analogy for all the techniques we're learning. He said, at that stage, you can be a very dangerous person. So without the oversight of instructor and everything that gives you a code of chivalry, a way to behave in society with those warlike skills you have, then I think that's what can make a person very out of balance, So again, I think as a martial artist, yes, they're different, but you can have both. You can have both, and that's, I think, is a big responsibility of instructors, to pass on that chivalry, that code of honor, that respect, that integrity. Because finally, I can't say again, and I've said this a lot in interviews, I often say to people, it's not the 2 hours on the mat where you're doing all this stuff that makes you a martial artist. It's the 22 hours off the mat. How you behave in society with everybody around you at home, with your kids, with your friends and everything, at the local bar. That's what makes you a martial artist. And I think that's an incredible difference. I think that's well worth thinking about with the way we teach our martial arts.
Wonderful, Richard. Thank you so much. I look forward to speaking with you again on similar subjects.
Thank you, Farah boys. Enjoy it.